Hey guys, Jeremy here with Simple Little Life and welcome to another edition of Tool Time Tuesday. This week, I'm just going to show you a little bit more on my 2x72 homemade belt grinder. Now, I originally did the build video and I'd always planned on making a follow-up video to it, and especially now that I've used it for well over a month, just to kind of give you some of my thoughts and some of the feedback I have on it, a couple little changes I made, and also I've got some great input from you guys on a few things that I could change and modify, and I'm certainly going to incorporate some of those ideas in the future. But before we get started, let's take a look at this week's viewer knife. Troy sent me an email a while ago about a knife that he had made, and he had spent all summer going to garage sales and gathering up basic hand tools to make a knife, and this is his very first knife that he had made. I think it turned out really great, and the feeling that you get when you make your first knife is just unbelievable. I really like the file work that he did on the spine of the knife, and what a great attention to detail that you've done, Troy. Fantastic job. Keep up the great work, and as a testament to anybody else who wants to get into knife making but you don't really know how to start, I mean, there's so much great info out there on YouTube. I've got lots on my channel, even a basic 3-part series on making a knife, and ultimately it comes down to just doing it. So Troy, good on you for just gathering up the tools and just getting at it, and you made a really great knife here. Thanks for sharing your picture with us. Okay, let's take a look at this belt grinder. Alright, so a real quick overview. I made this grinder on a 3-legged stand. The reason I wanted 3 legs is that it's easier to move around, and if you've got 4 legs, typically in some type of a shop environment, you're going to need a way to level and adjust those legs. But with a tripod design, really you don't need to. It's pretty much always going to sit flat. Doesn't matter if there's something under a leg or if your floor is slightly uneven. Wherever I put this, it's going to rest evenly on all 3 legs relatively, and it really doesn't rock that much. So for the main base part of the frame, I used a 1/2-inch plate, and I just kind of laid out a belt and derived the shape of this from that, and it's a 3-wheel design. So I've got my drive wheel here, and this is a V-belt going to the motor. Now I've had some questions about the motor, and this motor is a 750 RPM. It's a 1 horsepower, and it's a single-phase motor, so 110 volts. And I've got roughly a 2-to-1 ratio on there, so I'm slowing this down. Ultimately, my final drive is being slowed down, so I've got you know, I forget what the exact size of the pulley is here, but the one that goes into my belt drive shaft is twice the size as the one that's on the motor. So I've got 50% speed reduction, which incidentally also gives you a 50% power increase, so a 1 horsepower is plenty enough to drive this grinder. My drive wheel is a 5-inch, and again I've just got that mounted on a 3/4-inch shaft. I've got 2 flange bearings kind of spaced out with a piece of C-channel here to give it some rigidity, and then I've got my homemade tensioner / tracking device and my crowned idler wheel, and again my drive wheel is crowned as well. And if you don't know what that means, essentially this surface of the pulley, instead of being totally flat, it's actually on a curve like this. It's convexed, and what that does is that the belts will always ride in the high part of there. So with a crowned tracking wheel and a crowned drive wheel, it really helps your belt tracking. If these were machined totally flat, it would be very difficult to properly track the belt, and it would always be moving. So very important if you're getting into building your own belt grinder. If at all possible, make sure you can get some crown wheels. They make a huge difference in the tracking. Now the biggest reason I wanted a horizontal belt grinder was for a small wheel attachment. Obviously I've got my KMG, my vertical belt grinder, and I really like that, but I wanted a small wheel attachment. Now, if I had a V8D drive or even some step pulleys on my KMG, I could probably run these small wheels. But these small wheels, they spin so much quicker than, you know, larger wheels or you know, large contact wheels, so you really need to be careful. If I were to run these wheels on this grinder at the speed this grinder's set up, I'd probably end up cooking these bearings just because they'd run too fast. So that was the reason I went with this separate grinder. And also for a lot of the work that I'm doing, it's nice to have it horizontal for putting in different finger twirls, different profiles and stuff like that. And that was the biggest reason that I had built this grinder. Overall, I'm really happy with it. These small wheels work absolutely fantastic. And I had ended up purchasing some rubber-coated wheels, because the metal wheels, with the certain belts and where the belts are joined, there's no forgiveness. Every time that joint comes around, it leaves a little bump, and it actually doesn't leave a really great finish. So I ended up picking up some rubber wheels. These are, I believe they're around a 90 durometer. from knifemaker.ca. They're pricey. These wheels were $90 each, but they really make a big difference, and I put my final finishes on the knife with the rubber wheels. All the rough shaping and stuff like that, I'll still use my steel wheels just so I'm not wearing out the rubber on here, because I like all rubber things, especially something like this where you're putting a lot of force on. Eventually these wheels are going to wear out and they're going to deform and misshape, so I try to use my metal wheels as much as possible, but I really do like having the option of these rubber wheels. And the one part that I had really just cobbled together at the very end was this horizontal part right here. Now, this platen compared to this work rest isn't even exactly 90 degrees yet. I'm gonna take this off. I've just got it very quickly tacked on, and I ended up putting a 45 here so that I could use this for chamfering different types of scale material or something like that. But I'm gonna redo this whole thing, and I've had a lot of great input from you guys, and so the new setup that's gonna go on here is gonna involve a little bit more engineering and probably a little bit more in-depth fabrication of the parts. So this part here will eventually go away, but for now it does work good for quick shaping and roughing. Really enjoy this. And again, you see in the build video, you notice for my tool rest for this, all I've done is I've used some steel pins and drilled very precise holes. So this is actually just a press fit. I can pop this off like that. And these are the holes I've got here. I notched this out obviously to clear out for my small wheels. And so when I'm changing out my small wheels, I'll just lift this out, and then when I'm done, simply pop it into place. And you can see it's a very nice precise fit there. It doesn't rattle at all when you're using it, and it's easy on and off. I wanted something that was without fasteners, just because I want to speed up the process real quick. So that's how that works. Other than that, I've got my switch on it. Just regular outlet switch. In the spring, once it's warm outside, I'm going to paint this whole thing and do it up properly. I'll finish all my final tweaks to it. But other than that, it's working really well. I'm going to grab the camera and I'll show you it kind of up close. Alright, so here you can see this work rest and the rubber wheels in there. Work really well. Also, one thing I've done is I pretty much strictly use the 1-inch belts. Now, I have another video on the belt slitter that I made, and that works really good because I can move this belt. You can see I can come all the way up and get this belt fully above the work surface without it touching the small wheel holder, and then also I can go completely below the surface before it starts touching the work holder as well. Let's see if I can get an angle of that here. Kind of hard to see in there. But that just allows me to use the entire belt surface, whereas if I were running just a 2x72, I can come up a certain distance and then I'll start rubbing into here, but I'll still have belt below the work plate that I can't use. So the 1x72 really allows me to use all of this surface, and it really maximizes belt usage. And then again, here's that 45 that I'd put in, and like I said, this isn't totally 90 degrees. It's fairly close. It's probably about 88. 87, but when I grind from one side and then flip the piece over and grind from the other, there is a slight discrepancy, so I'm a little cautious how I use this. And again, you can see the drive wheel here, and there's the drive pulley, and then I can't really get in there right now, but you see I've got the 2 bearings there, and that just gives it rigidity and holds this shaft steady. My homemade tracking device, I still haven't put the proper knurled knob on there, and I was going to order the one from KMG. I was going to order this one right here, but I'm going to make my own. I've got a lathe and I just need to find my knurling tool, and then I'm going to make one of those. For now, I use a screwdriver and I adjust it that way. One other change I did make was that I put another hole for my tensioner, and the reason for that is when I use my 1/4-inch wheel, I didn't quite have enough belt tension. It was slipping a little bit, so when I swap out my 1/4-inch wheel, I needed a little bit more tension on my tensioner device, and so I put another hole in there and just moved this back about 1/2 inch. And again, just to loosen it off, I just grab it like this, loosen it and let it go, and then for tracking up and down, works fantastic. So let me pop this plate off for you. And sometimes I will work on this end of it without this plate in place, because it's nice you've got the full surface there. But then when I do need to change out a belt, just pull this off. Kind of difficult to do one-handed. Oh boy. So now when I need to change wheels, I simply pull my belt off, and these just slide right out like that. And again, this is the rubber coated wheel. These won't last forever. But I use these mostly just for finishing work, and for all my rough shaping and stuff, I'm still using the metal wheels mostly. for these two wheels here, these are all the small wheels that I currently have. So in my metal ones, I've got up to 1 inch. There's my 1 inch. And I've got sizes 7/8, 3/4, 5/8, 1/2 inch, 3/8, and 1/4 inch. And this 1/4 inch one, I've actually used it quite a bit. Works really, really well. And that's a really nice little option. You can do a lot of real fine detailed work with such a small wheel like this. And in that belt grinder, it works really, really well. And again, in the rubber wheels, I ended up buying a 3/4, a 1/2 inch, and a 3/8. I haven't used either of these yet. I barely made, I think, 2 knives with my 3/4, but absolutely a major difference. If you're considering a small wheel attachment, keep in mind that these metal wheels are going to give you a fairly bumpy finish with certain belts. Some belts are better than others, but if you want to be able to use all your belts that you have, you're probably going to want to get a rubber set of wheels. And that's the reason I bought the 3 most common sizes that I think I'm going to need. 3/4, absolutely use this one all the time. And then the 1/2 inch and 3/8, I do believe that I'll be using those a lot. So for the rubber wheels, I've only got 3, but then I've got a wide range of the metal wheels. And again, metal wheels I use for the real rough shaping, the main profiling. And once I've got the scales glued up and I'm doing the final finishing on the blade, then I'll switch over to my rubber wheels. And like I say, I've got about, on this whole grinder, probably 1.5 months of use. I've probably done 10 blades with it so far, and absolutely love it. This is one of those tools that I always wonder, man, why on earth did I wait so long to make one of these? And ultimately it's just a matter of time, but you know, a lot of people, I've had a lot of comments too, people are somehow thinking it's a 2x42 because KMG does make one that comes as a standard in 2x42, and you can buy an adapter plate to make it a 2x72, but that's not the case with this. I made this and I've designed this for 2x72 belts so that all the belts I use on my other grinder can be used on this one. And as well, I keep a decent inventory of belts that I've cut in half using my little belt slitter tool. And if you haven't seen that video, check that one out. So all in all, hopefully this kind of answers some of your questions. Again, I've had a lot of questions about the RPM. It's a 1750 motor. This is a TEFC, so a totally enclosed fan cooled motor. And 1 to 2 on the drive. So we've got a 50% reduction in speed. And then with the 5-inch contact wheel, I believe this thing runs around 1100 surface feet per minute, which is plenty slow enough for the small wheel attachment. And I've also got plans on possibly making some other type of attachment. It's not totally done yet, but I just want to kind of do a real quick overview video and kind of let you guys see a little more in detail without having to watch the entire build video. So again, before I paint it, I'll probably clean this up. I wasn't sure how much room I needed at the end here, so I kind of left this. But I'll end up cleaning this up, you know, and finishing everything up and getting it all painted up come the springtime when it's not so cold outside. But alright guys, so there's a quick look at my 2x72 horizontal belt grinder. Now, if you have ever considered a horizontal belt grinder or even a small wheel attachment, highly recommend it. It works so good and I use it all the time. Again, it allowed me to get rid of my oscillating spindle sander, which was what I was using to do a lot of the detailed work on my handles and stuff. And the one drawback with those is that it's just so hard to find a variety of different grits and finishes on your abrasives. And also those abrasives are very expensive compared to a 2x72 belt. So definitely a more efficient way to work and faster way to work and way more control. Absolutely love having that, especially when I put them the two grinders side by side. It's amazing. A lot of times I'm working, I can just go from one to another to another to another and really enjoy that setup. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching guys. Cheers.